Again, all these things that you see in this world in which you are so much interested, which you like so much, by which you are attracted. The Vedanta says, according to the laws of karma, you like them, you are interested in them, you love them. You recognize them only because you have been all that at one time. You have been rocks, you have been asleep in the rocks, you have glided with the streams, you have grown with the plants, you have run with the animals, and you recognize and see all of them. We can prove that by another argument now. This is an adaptation of the argument of Plato. What is reminiscence? Reminiscence implies the knowing of a thing beforehand, which we remember now. For instance, suppose some persons come to these lectures together, always an inseparable pair. They come to the 7 lectures that were delivered in this hall. But to the 8th lecture only one comes, the other does not. Friends will put this question to the separated man. Where is your friend, O dear or dear one? Where is he? Why will this question be put? This question is caused by the law of reminiscence, which is the law of association also. We see the two together always, the two become familiar to us, the two become, as it were, one in our mind, the two were united, and afterwards we see only one of them. And this one at once reminds us of the other. This is how association in the brain was established. This is how reminiscence was brought about. This very reminiscence implies a previous knowledge of the thing which we remember. Now here is your syllogism. All men are mortal. John is a man, therefore John is mortal. All your logic, all your arguments, all your reasoning depend upon this premise. All men are mortal. John is a man. Speak only these 2 premises. Hold back the conclusion, and at once in our minds comes up like a reminiscence the conclusion. John is mortal. How was this conclusion brought about? Was it not brought about by the law of reminiscence as defined by Plato? It was. The 3 propositions, all men mortal, John a man, and John is a mortal, are there. Out of these, 2 were placed before you, all men mortal, John is a man. These 2 were placed before you, and all at once by the laws of thought, as philosophers call it. The 3rd proposition comes to your mind. It will come up in the mind of everybody. How is that? This is brought about in the same way as when we see one of the friends, we are reminded of the other that was always in the company of this friend. Well, how could this reminiscence come about? How was this law of thought inherent in the brains of each and all? How was this law of thought which brought about this kind of reminiscence present in the minds of each and all? By a kind of reminiscence. Now, reminiscence implies previous knowledge. Every child that has a brain is capable of reasoning. We can argue with every child. When he begins to reflect a little, we may present to him this syllogism, and he will accept it. Here we are proving a proposition of Euclid. We arrive at the conclusion at once. This conclusion is brought about by reminiscence. This reminiscence, being inherent in the brains of each and all, is a sure proof of the fact that you have already been familiar with the things which are revived in your brains by reminiscence. Now, in order that you should have been cognizant, familiar with the things which are revived in your brain by reminiscence, you must have learned and acquired them at some time or other. Now you are sure that you did not learn or acquire them in this life. Where did you get this knowledge? The Vedanta says in a previous birth. Here is another question. Well, if we are the masters of our own destiny, none of us ever desires to be poor. How are we born poor then? All of us desire to be born rich. None of us wants to be poor. And yet most of us are born poor. How is that? The Vedanta replies, you should look at matters in their proper light. You ought to study them thoroughly. Do not count on half-truths. Look at the facts from all sides. It is not true that everybody desires to become the Lord Mayor of London. It is not true that everybody wishes to become a millionaire. Here is a man who gets $5 a week. His ambition is to be promoted to a position where he will get $7 a week. Never does the idea enter his mind to become the Lord Mayor of London. No, it is not true, you see. And look at the matter from another standpoint. People are inconsistent and unreasonable in their desires. They do not adjust their desires to the circumstances. They become slaves to desires. They are not masters of their desires, and thus, despite themselves, by their own desires, they are led into straits and difficulties. They are led into trouble and anxiety. Now comes the interesting part of the talk for each and all. Suppose, here is a man who wants to satisfy his animal passions. He does not want to have anything to do with knowledge. He wants to meddle in no way with spirituality, with religion, with morality, with name or fame. He wants to have nothing to do with these things. All that he wants is to satisfy his animal desires, his sensuous appetites. This man dies. This is a hypothetical case to illustrate the matter. Now, what kind of parents will he make for himself? His desire does not require him to be born of learned parents. The kind of energy which is in him does not demand any rich parents for its congenial soil. It does not demand any educated or civilized parents. No, the Vedanta says that if this man is entirely made up of animal passions, he will get a most proper and befitting body in the form of hogs or dogs, because there he will inherit a body which is not tired of eating, which is not tired of gratifying animal desires, a body which is fit for making a fool of himself. He will get a body of that kind. In order that his desires may be fulfilled, he must be born as a hog or dog. Thus is he the master of his own destiny, even if he is a dog or a hog. When the people of this world desire anything, they do not see what the consequences will be. They do not see to what they will be led. And afterwards, when they receive the consequences of their desires, they begin to weep and cry and bewail their destiny, bewail their stars. They begin to weep and gnash their teeth. So even while you are desiring, you see what the consequences will be. It is you yourself that bring about this misery and nobody else. Ram will tell you now the story of a poet in East India. He was a Mohammedan poet, a very good and clever man. He was living at the court of one of the native princes, who was highly interested in him. One night the native prince kept him long in his company, and this poet amused the prince with all sorts of poems, witty stories, and most amusing tales. The prince went to bed very late on account of being amused by the witty poet, to such a degree that he forgot all about his sleep. The queen asked the prince what was the cause of his unusual delay in retiring to his rooms. The prince replied, "Oh, we had a wonderful man with us this evening. He was so good, so witty and amusing." Then the queen inquired more about him, and her curiosity made the king expatiate about the capability and attainments of the poet, to such a degree that they had to sit until a late hour, so that it was near dawn when they retired. Now the curiosity of the queen being excited to the highest pitch, she asked the prince to bring this witty poet before her some day. Well, the next day this witty poet was brought before the queen. You know, in India the customs are quite different from those in the West. In India, females live in separate apartments and do not mix much with males, with gentlemen. They live apart, especially Mohammedan women, not Hindus, wear heavy veils and do not let anybody see them excepting their husbands or those who are very pure and noble and pious. Well, this poet was brought by the king into the harem, as we call it, into the private apartments of the ladies. There he sang his poems and recited his stories. The ladies were highly amused. Then the poet gave out that he was blind. He was suffering from a disease of the eyes. But he was not blind in reality. Now the wicked intention of this poet was to be allowed to live in the private apartments of the ladies, so that they might not mistrust him. And the ladies, thinking him to be blind, might be free in their walks and talks, in going from room to room, and might not keep any veils on their countenances when passing by him. Now, believing him to be blind, the prince allowed him to remain in the apartment of the ladies. But you know, truth cannot be concealed. Truth crushed to earth shall rise again. The eternal ears of God are hers. Truth crushed to earth shall rise again. The eternal ears of God are hers. It cannot be concealed. It will out one day. One day this poet asked one of the maid servants to bring something to him. You know, those people who become a little rich in India become very lazy. The signs of riches is looked upon to be laziness. You are a very noble man if you can do nothing yourself. If somebody has to come and help you to get a seat in the carriage, you are a most noble man. If somebody else has to help you to dress yourself, then you are a most noble man. If somebody else has to come and help you even in your walks, then you are a most noble man. Thus, dependence is a sign of honor, independence and self. Mastery are looked upon to be dependence and servility. When this poet got an honorable position in the house of the prince, he thought it beneath his dignity to leave his seat and bring a chair to where he wanted it. So he ordered one of the maid servants to do it, but she replied harshly that she had no leisure. She could not spare the time. After that there appeared another servant, and he beckoned to her to come forward to him and asked her to move the chair, but she said that there was no chair in the room. He said, "Bring that basin of water to me," she said. He said, "Bring that basin of water to me." She said, "There is none in this room." "I will go into the other room and bring it to you." He said, "Bring it. There is one in the room. Do you not see it? There it is." In his anxiety to get the thing done, he forgot himself. That is what happens. This is how truth plays a joke with liars. You know, Lady Macbeth perpetrated that deed, but she could not conceal it. The truth made her mad, and she confessed it to the doctor of her own accord. That is what happens. This is the law of nature. When this poet said, "Here it is, do you not see it?" Then the maid at once, instead of doing that job for him, ran straight to the queen and divulged the secret and said, "Lo, that man is not blind. He is a wicked man. He ought to be turned out of the house." He was turned out of the house, but about 3 days after he actually became blind. How is that? Why, the law of karma tells you that this man becomes blind by his own will. He is the master of his own destiny. Blindness is brought on himself by his own self. Nobody else makes him blind. His own desires make him blind. Afterwards, when blindness comes, he begins to weep and cry, to gnash his teeth and beat his breast.